Hello, and welcome to Budget Commander. On this channel, we'll discuss Magic the Gathering topics with a focus on playing Commander on a budget. We'll cover things like deck building, top cards, deck techs, and more. Let's get started. Hello friends, today we have an Omnath Locus of the Roil deck tech for you. This is a budget deck tech, specifically 1DH, meaning all the cards in the deck are $1 or under, with the exception of the Commander, who can be up to $5. As of the day of recording, this deck costs just under $43, and cards were price checked using mtgstocks.com. Know that prices do fluctuate, so when you see this video, prices might be above or below the price point I have them at here today. Omnath is a 4-to-cast 3/3 elemental that reads, when Omnath enters the battlefield, it deals damage to any target equal to the number of elementals you control. So you can hit a player, hit a planeswalker, or hit a creature with this ability. He has a second ability that says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target elemental you control, and if you control 8 or more lands, draw a card. So we're going to be trying to play elementals here. This is an elemental tribal. But we also have kind of a sub-land theme going on as well. We're going to start out by talking about the Accelerants. These are the cards that are going to get us extra lands to the battlefield early or get us access to extra mana so that we can get into our game plan. Our game plan is to play big elementals, try to give them flying or unblockable or just smash face with them and cause our opponents problems that way. We have Omnath, who's a super utility. He does a ton of different things for us in that he can remove stuff, make our stuff bigger, and draw us cards. And then we're going to next talk about cards that are going to interfere with our opponent's game plan. We'll talk about cards that provide us consistency, and then we'll talk about the lands that we have in this deck. So for Accelerants, we have Colony Heart Expedition, Rampant Growth, and Farseek, which all cheat extra lands onto the battlefield early. Colony Heart triggers as soon as we've played 3 lands once it's out, or we can choose to trigger it then. Rampant Growth gets us any one of our colors, and Farseek can get us a mountain or an island. Fertilid, Harrow, and Springbloom Druid also do the same in that they cheat extra lands on the battlefield early. I do want to note that Fertilid has a +1/+1 counters theme, so he fits in nicely with Omnath. We get to remove counters from Fertilid to put lands onto the battlefield tapped. But then when lands enter the battlefield tapped, we get to put +1/+1 counters on our creatures. So you can, as long as you have enough mana, continue using Fertilid over and over again, just fetching all the lands out of your library to the battlefield. Embodiment of Spring and Silverglade Elemental help us to cheat extra lands onto the battlefield early. They also are elementals, so they help our elemental count, which is nice. We also have Circuitous Route, which can get us 2 basics to the battlefield tapped, or get us 2 gates. We are running all 3 of the possible gates in this deck, so you probably want to get gates if they aren't already on your battlefield. Search for Tomorrow is going to cheat us an extra land onto the battlefield early. We can pay 3 to do it right now, or we can suspend it at the cost of 1 green. Beanstalk Giant, we're going to actually want to send on an adventure using that bottom left-hand game text to put a land onto the battlefield early, and then later cast the Beanstalk Giant out of exile, and then he'll be huge since we're trying to get lots of lands onto the battlefield anyway. Bright Hearth Banner makes all of our elementals cost 1 less, so he's a cost reducer. If we don't want him out, we can also just use him to give a +1/+1 counter to a creature as well. Llanowar Scout and Boduca Gardener could be considered Accelerants, but I put them under our game plan because we do want to get to the point where we're able to play multiple lands a turn. We have some cards that bounce lands back to our own hand so that we can play more than one if we have either of these guys out or either of a couple other cards out, so that we can get extra landfall triggers from Omnath or our other cards that do similar things. The Boduca Gardener, I do want to note that when you have 10 or more lands, if you use his ability, he flips over and becomes Dokai, the Weaver of Life, which means once per turn for 6 mana, you're going to be able to create a XX elemental where X is the number of lands you control. So basically, make a huge, because you have 10 or more lands already, make a huge elemental. He helps our elemental count, gives us huge creatures, both the things we want to do. Gear Priority helps us to play extra lands per turn. It also does the same for our opponents. Each player gets to play an extra land each turn, so it does help them as well. But since our game is scheming around this idea, we're going to be able to capitalize on it. Well, most likely they will not. Rampaging Balos, although not an elemental, creates us a beast every time we play a land, or every time a land enters our battlefield. When you're balling on a budget, you can't always stick so hard to theme, so we're running the Rampaging Balos. Living Twister can turn any land in our hand into a shock, but we mostly want him for that second ability because we're going to be able to return lands to our hand, allowing us to replay lands and re-get those landfall triggers. Creeping Trailblazer is a great elemental that gives +1/+0 to all of our other elementals. You can also make him bigger by paying 4 to give him +1/+1 for each elemental on the battlefield. And then Overgrowth Elemental and Thunder Drake are just going to slowly get bigger and bigger over time. The Drake gets bigger whenever we play 2 or more spells. He gets a +1/+1 counter. The Overgrowth Elemental gets a +1/+1 counter anytime one of our own creatures dies. So the longer these guys are out, the bigger they're going to get. We also have Zendikar Incarnate, Terra Ravager, and Wilderness Elemental, which have power based on a number of lands. So the Zendikar Incarnate gets X power equal to the number of lands we control. Terra Ravager gets +X/+0 when it attacks based on the number of lands the defending player controls. And then Wilderness Elemental has X power, where X is equal to the number of non-basic lands our opponents control. So Wilderness Elemental is going to be better the more colors our opponents are playing, because that typically means more non-basics, and also the more opponents we have out, or that we're playing against. Woodborn Behemoth is almost always going to be an 8/8 with trample as long as we have 8 or more lands. Rubble Hulk is just a huge creature equal to the number of lands we control. We can also use it to pump a creature if it doesn't get blocked, or one of our creatures with trample. And then Awakening of Vitu-Ghazi is going to give or turn one of our lands into a 9/9. It does give it haste, so you'll be able to use this almost anytime and get some great value out of it. I kind of wish it was a green-white card, because Vitu-Ghazi is supposed to be a Selesnya thing, I thought, but fits in with this deck, so we're going to take it. Simic Ascendancy helps with our +1/+1 counters theme. It also gives us a secondary win condition and can really accelerate those growth counters that it gets. So every time a creature gets a +1/+1 counter of ours, we get a growth counter on Simic Ascendancy. If we have 20 or more growth counters at the beginning of our upkeep, we're going to win the game. With Omnath out, we're going to be able to put lots of +1/+1 counters on our creatures and really accelerate that as a possible win condition. Retreat to Kazandu is going to help us do that, in that whenever we play a land, we get to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature. We can also gain 2 life, but that's probably not what we're doing. And then Chandra, Novice Pyromancer, is just a great utility card. It can ramp us, giving us 2 red for her -1 loyalty ability. Her +1 gives all of our elementals +2/+0 until the end of turn, and she can also -2 to shock something. So just a great all-around card right there. Return of the Wild Speaker I put under our game plan because we're going to hopefully use it to pump all of our creatures up and then swing in for a lot of damage. But if we want to, we can also use it to help us draw some cards, restock our hand. The Thicket Crashers, giving all of our elementals trample, and then the Zephyr Charge is going to allow us to pay 1 and a blue to give one of our creatures flying. You only need to use this once to get in a lot of damage because our creatures are so huge, but if you have several targets, you can take out your opponents pretty quickly. Simic Charm has 3 abilities. We're usually going to use it for its second ability, which is to give permanents we control hexproof until end of turn, to just kind of protect our game plan and keep it going. But we can also use it to give a creature +3/+3 or return a creature to its owner's hand. Alright, into the ways that we're going to interfere with our opponent's game plan. We have Essence Capture, which counters a creature, also gives us a +1/+1 counter. Reality Shift, which exiles any creature and manifests the top card of their library. And then Void Stalker, which shuffles creatures as well as itself back into our opponents and our own libraries. Usually you're going to want to use this on your opponent's commander or general, because they're almost always going to send it back to the command zone because they don't want it to get shuffled into their libraries. Dawnbreeze Ambush is going to give a +1/+1 counter to a creature of our choice, and then we're going to be able to have it deal damage equal to its power to another creature or planeswalker. Incubation Incongruity is going to exile anything and turn it into a 3/3 frog. If we want to, we can also use it to look at the top 5 cards and possibly put a creature from among them into our hand. But we usually want to use it to exile something. Chain Reaction and Starstorm are both board wipes, which help us if things get out of hand. And then Magmatic Force is a 7/7 elemental that says at the beginning of each upkeep, it deals 3 damage to any target. So you can help get rid of small to mid-sized creatures, deal with planeswalkers that are getting out of hand, or just pick away at your opponent's life total. Further interference, we have Return to Nature, which gets rid of an artifact, enchantment, or 1 card from a graveyard. So you can stop an opponent from going off that way. Ingot Sure is an elemental that gets rid of an artifact, and then Negate just counters any non-creature spell that our opponents are trying to cast. Cards that provide consistency, we have Brainstorm, Anticipate, and Growth Spiral. All of them are going to draw us a card, help us siphon cards, or Growth Spiral can actually help us get an extra land to the battlefield on the turn we play it. Elemental Bond is going to get us a draw every time we play a creature with power 3 or more. Seer's Sundial gives us an extra card draw every time we play a land, as long as we pay 2 mana. So this is kind of a backup for Omnath if he gets removed or his cost gets too high. Colossal Majesty gives us a draw at the beginning of our upkeep as long as we control a creature with power 4 or greater. We also have Cloudkin Seer, which enters and draws us a card. Risen Reef, which when it enters reveals the top card of our library. If it's a land, we put it onto the battlefield so it can ramp us, but if not, it's going to go into our hand. And then, as long as it's out, each time we play another elemental, the same thing happens. Reveal the top card. If it's a land, goes onto the battlefield, otherwise to our hand. So while this guy's out, we're going to get our ball rolling really well here. Slither Muse is cool. It's an elemental 3/3, and when it dies, or leaves play, should I say, but usually that's going to mean dying, we get to draw some cards equal to the difference between the number of cards in our hand and the number of cards in an opponent's hand. So if we have 3 cards in our hand, Slither Muse dies, there's an opponent that has 7, we can choose that opponent, and the difference would be 4. So we're going to draw 4 cards up to 7. Great way to restock your hand. Harmonize and Urban Evolution are each going to draw us 3 cards. Urban Evolution is going to allow us to play an extra land as well. And then Omnath, Locus of Roil, as long as we have 8 or more lands, is going to draw us a card. He also puts +1/+1 counters on things and can remove stuff as well. But we're using him mostly for the consistency, so that's why I put him here. Regrowth gets us anything back from our graveyard to our hand. Gravesifter gets all of our elementals back from our graveyard to our hand. It does help any of our opponents who are playing tribal themes because when he enters, each player chooses a creature type and returns any number of those type of cards from their graveyard to their hand. The Mending of Dominaria helps us get some creatures back from our graveyard to our hand. If we make it all the way to Chapter 3, we're also going to be able to put any lands from our graveyard onto the battlefield. So we get some landfall triggers, ideally, as well. As for lands that we're running, we've got Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse, and Warped Landscape, which we can fetch out any basics we need to our battlefield. Blighted Woodland also helps ramp us a little bit. Rogue's Passage gives our creatures that needed evasion so that they can't be blocked. Mosswort Bridge essentially draws us a card in that it has Hideaway. So when it enters, we're going to look at the top 4, pick our favorite from among them, and exile that card. And then if we ever have 10 or more power, we can use Mosswort Bridge to cast that exiled card. Forgotten Cave, Lonely Sandbar, and Tranquil Thicket all have cycling, or if we want to, we can play them as a land. They enter tapped and give us one of our respective colors. We also have Frontier Bivouac, which gives us any one of our 3 colors. Lumbering Falls and Simic Growth Chamber give us green-blue. The Lumbering Falls can help us with our elemental count if we need it to. It can become a creature. And then note that the Simic Growth Chamber bounces a land, which we like. If we get 2 of these bounce lands and we don't have much else going on, we can at least continue getting those landfall triggers from our cards. Thornwood Falls, Woodland Stream, Simic Gilgate give us green-blue. Gruul Turf, Kazandu Refuge, and Rugged Highlands give us red-green. Timber Gorge, Temple of Abandon, and Gruul Gilgate give us red-green. Highland Lake, Swiftwater Cliffs, Is It Gilgate give us blue-red. Is It Boilerworks also gives us blue-red. And for basics, we're running 4 islands, 9 forests, and 3 mountains. Average CMC of this deck is 3.36. There's the mana curve, as you can see, lots of 2-drops. But if you like the idea of having a really utility commander that can do lots of different things, also playing a tribal elemental theme, give this deck a go. Let me know how it went. Otherwise, let me know which commander you'd like to see next. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and have a great rest of your day. Peace. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, you should like the video. You can subscribe by hitting the icon in the top left. YouTube thinks you'll like the video on the top right. Otherwise, you can check out one of the playlists on the bottom. Have a great day.